and welcome to the EOC review about plants. Let's get started. Okay. This is a plant. It's a living thing, and it meets all of the characteristics of life, the requirements for life. So we're going to review the different plant structures by talking about how the plant meets each of the characteristics of life. So we're going to start with the first one, the fact that the plant has cells and different levels of organization. These are the levels of organization. You have a cell as the smallest functioning unit, and then a bunch of cells working together as a tissue. A bunch of tissues working together is an organ. So here is what you need to know. This is a plant cell. These are the tissues that you're responsible for knowing their functions, and these are the organs. We'll go over them in depth as we go through the video. The next characteristic of life is using energy. In order to have energy to use, we have to break down food. You know that plants make their own food through a process called photosynthesis. This process takes place in the ground tissue. Just a little review. In order for photosynthesis to take place, a plant needs carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. And photosynthesis makes glucose and oxygen. Photosynthesis happens mostly in the leaves. So this is the main place where you find ground tissue, although you really find it pretty much all over the plant, any place that's green. Okay, so we're going to focus on the needs of the plant to do photosynthesis, and we're going to start with water. A plant gets water by sucking it up from the ground with its roots. Inside of the roots, there is something called vascular tissue, and specifically xylem. The xylem is a little tube that goes all the way up the root, up the stem, into the leaves, and it transports water. So now the water has gone from the soil, up the roots, up the stem, and over to the leaf. We're getting sunlight just because the sun is out and it's being absorbed by the leaf. The only thing we need now is carbon dioxide. This mostly comes into the plant thanks to dermal tissue. Dermal tissue you can think of like the skin of a plant. That's called a cuticle. Plants have this cuticle around their leaves. It's waxy in order for plants to not dry out, meaning they keep the water inside the leaf. Okay. However, the leaf also is involved in getting carbon dioxide from the environment. So on the surface of the leaf, there are little holes called stomata. They open and close. So when the stomata are open, they let in carbon dioxide and let out oxygen gas. If the plant doesn't have enough water, the stomata will close in order to prevent something called transpiration, which is water leaving through the stomata. And if a plant is running low on water, or if it's very hot outside, the stomata will close so that transpiration can't happen. This is controlled by something called guard cells. The cells are right here, these banana-shaped ones, okay, and they will open and close the hole itself, which is the stomata. Okay, so now we've got water from the roots. We have sunshine from the sun, and we have carbon dioxide thanks to the little holes called stomata that are letting in the carbon dioxide gas. So photosynthesis is taking place in the plant. Now the leaf has sugar, glucose, waiting. So the other vascular tissue called phloem takes that sugar and transports it around to the rest of the plant. So the sugar originates in the leaves and then it goes around to the rest of the plant through the phloem, which is another type of vascular tissue. Okay. So the next characteristic of life is being able to respond to the environment. And we already gave an example of how a plant does this. The guard cells in the stomata, which is a part of the dermal tissue. Okay? These open and close due to how much water is in the plant and whether or not it's very hot outside. They open and close. The next characteristic is growing. There's a special tissue called meristematic tissue. You find this typically right here at the very top of the plant or at the very bottom of the roots. And the meristematic tissue does mitosis, and when it's doing mitosis, that's making new cells and that's allowing the plant to grow. There's a special type of meristematic tissue called cambium, and this is making the plant stem get wider, fatter, thicker. Okay, so this cambium is mostly going to be around tree trunks, making the stem get very, very wide. So meristematic tissue in general is just growing. Cambium is specifically growing wider at the stem. All right, the last one, reproduction. The plant does its reproducing in the flowers and fruit. So here's a flower. All right, so a flower is the plant's reproductive organ. You've got male and female parts. The big one in the middle is the female part. At the very bottom is the ovary, and inside is the egg, or sometimes called the ovule or the ova. This middle part is called the style, and then on top you have something called the stigma. It's kind of like Velcro, and it catches pollen. All together, this big middle part is called the pistil. So remember that this is the female part in the middle. The male part are the other ones out here, the smaller ones. All together, the male part is called stamen. That's pretty easy to remember because it ends in "min." The stamen has two parts. There's the filament, and then the top part is anther. Now the anther is what makes pollen, and pollen is plant sperm. So what happens with fertilization is the pollen gets caught on the stigma, goes down the style, goes to the ovary, and fertilizes the egg. If this egg gets fertilized, the walls of this ovary get very thick, and they will become a fruit or a nut. And right here, the egg once the egg is fertilized, it becomes a seed, which is a plant embryo, a little baby plant. And it's surrounded by the thick ovary walls, which are the fruit. So flowers, cones, and fruits all are reproductive organs. They work pretty much the same way. The other organs in a plant are roots, stems, and leaves. We wouldn't normally think of them like organs like a heart or a lung, but they are because they're made up of several tissues. So the last thing to think about is what types of tissues make up what organs. So in the root, you find mostly vascular tissue. In the stem, you're also going to find mostly vascular tissue, some ground as well. Also, you can find meristematic tissue if the stem is growing. In the leaf, you're going to find mostly dermal tissue, being the outer covering, ground tissue, being the photosynthesis, and also vascular tissue, because the water has to get into the leaf and the sugar has to leave the leaf. You basically find ground tissue in every single organ, in the root, stems, and leaves. And all of this goes back to the plant cell itself. That's the smallest unit of function in the plant. So that's everything to know about plants for the EOC. Thank you.